You know you're in for a good time when you see some elves riding hawks. That's right, we've got the Wood Elves from War God in the thrilling conclusion of his best of three versus Miravoy. Miravoy here taking Cathay. We've got a mass Vanguard force of elves, so let's get to it straight away. Front line of Dryads here, second line with some Wild Hunters, including the Regiment of Renown, 2 Forest Dragons in the sky, 2 Hawk Riders as well, and Durthu. Of course, the big powerhouse himself leading the way in the Vanguard up against this Cathayan force with Peasant Long Spears. We've got plenty of cavalry as well, Jade Lancers and Peasant Horsemen on each flank, supported by plenty of Crowmen, including the Regiment of Renowned Empress Crowmen. Crane guns there, and Zhao Ming leading the way. No doubt he'll want to transform relatively soon to get ready to push back this massive Vanguard force, but immediately got the Hawk Riders moving up on the left side with the Dragons. They're going to just clash directly with the Crowmen. From a win condition perspective, this is actually really smart. The Crowmen are generally pretty strong units as well, but can be quite squishy, so here kind of sacrificing one Hawk Rider to a degree, but both Crowmen here upgraded Flock of Doom. The high charge of the Hawk Riders in melee plus the 2 Forest Dragons allows them to get some pretty serious work done. Meanwhile, over on the far side, other Hawk Riders swoop down to try and stem the tide. The Wild Riders are going to respond here. Looks like those Peasant Horsemen got torn up pretty badly. Sword of Daith helping to even things out, and especially tearing away the armor and dealing damage to Jade Lancers. That's quite important here, but there's a huge blob forming for Cathay. A lot of units involved in this fight, but not a lot of damage on the Wild Riders so far. One Hawk Rider is going to go after the Crane guns in the back as we see a massive double breath attack just nuking that blob of Jade Lancers and Peasant Horsemen. Some of the Jade Lancers, Peasant Horsemen detached to go protect the Crane guns in the back line from the Hawk Rider charge there, which looks like the Hawk Riders maybe fainted down briefly. We're going to try and lead some of those cavalry away. Meanwhile, nice Flock of Doom here from Durthu as well, continuing to damage the front line of Cathay. And the Dryads cleaning up the isolated Peasant Long Spears without any harmony or other support. They're not going to trade in their customary upwards fashion, but Hawk Riders really struggling. Right now the Crane Gunners have been able to stay safe for the most part. These Jade Lancers really need to hammer some charges on these Dryads to maintain the position here. The Handgunners have a pretty nice little high ground where they have fairly good visibility across the battle, so it's a little bit of a problem though to go 2v1 with Zhao Ming versus both Forest Dragons up in the sky. Yeah, they're actually going to charge down onto the ground even, get the support of the Wild Hunters of Kronos there if possible, and just generally support against those Jade Lancers, kind of just ignoring Zhao for now. But more Wild Riders coming, and more importantly, Durthu charging up the hill, Foe Seeker active, getting ready to lay down the tree law all over these Cathayan cavalry. Very important tree law. Yeah, speaking of which, a little Flock of Doom there. It's mostly just the one Jade Lancer, but even still, that Jade Lancer is significantly surrounded. We've got a little breath attack there as well, and yeah, they just got absolutely nuked in terms of damage. So far, War God doing a great job concentrating his damage and taking out individual units. Forest Dragons charge down once more. Durthu gonna close the distance, maybe try and go 3v1 in a single entity fight against Zhao here. Could probably take him down pretty quickly, but also just shredding this Cathayan cavalry. And heavy cavalry often can be the bane of high elves, especially when you have a high volume of heavy plus light cavalry, can kind of disrupt Wild Riders, but here, heavy single entity push and sort of the not fighting on even terms, which is definitely a skill that Wood Elf players should cultivate in order to be successful. True to their thematics, they are a faction that doesn't like to fight fair. And when you can get engagements like this, isolate enemy units kind of locally, use your mobility to bring power to a specific area, just crush units individually. Right now, though, the Wood Elves are starting to run out of steam outside of their single entities. Some tattered Cathayan forces are kind of collecting here, but it's not going to be much. Yep, looks like Miraboy is actually going to throw in the towel there rather than force Zhao to fight it out. Looks like the 2 dragons were going to close in, and once his leadership was gone, the rest of those units would not be able to do anything. But yeah, one of the few rare games where Crowmen kind of got destroyed, and War God, you know, very specifically here, intentionally targeting the crowmen early, then moving on to prioritizing the cavalry, and that's a huge amount of mobility from Miravoy. Definitely understandable against the Wood Elves, against a lot of builds. This will have a lot of success, and even against this build, there's a possibility of success, but the Double Dragon honestly is a pretty sneaky move. A lot of people won't necessarily take the tools to deal with that. Like, looking at Miravoy's build here, he didn't necessarily have the best tools. A lot of focus on that mobility to potentially chase down enemy ranged, and ultimately getting punished by the heavy single entity kind of countercharge here. Durthu himself, 20,000 damage dealt, even 100 kills, 2,000 gold value. Absolutely amazing, and relatively quick one, but, you know, sometimes the games do go like that, especially when you get a very aggressive Wood Elf Vanguard rush. Yeah, I mean, even the Hawk Riders really being used as melee units here more than anything. Both the Wild Riders also get some excellent value. Yeah, I mean, the Dragons, Breath Attacks got some good value. They themselves, just through their presence, were kind of able to win in a way, along with Durthu. But, yeah, people oftentimes don't respect the single entity power of Wood Elves. Like, they're not, you know, in your mind, high on the list, at least in my mind, high on the list often of the best monster factions in the game, but they absolutely should be respected in that way. Durthu in particular, due to the fact that Flock of Doom is still, and probably will continue to be, one of the most efficient damage spells in the game, makes it incredibly, him an incredibly good kind of combat caster monster. Obviously has amazing stats all the way around with, you know, 560 weapon strength, great melee attack, decent defense, 110 armor in particular. Also gets that tree physical resistance, and I didn't even realize he gets this Ancient Protector, so the physical resistance might as well be damage resistance if it's coming from, you know, melee sources. Still are somewhat vulnerable to long-range magic missile units, or missile units with magical damage, but even still, you know, outside of, like, even thinking about Cathay, it's not common that you might take, Grand Cathay. Yeah, I mean, you have this one Regiment of Renown, but Celestial Dragon crossbows are not shielded. At least this variant is not shielded, the Regiment of Renown, which is quite curious, which does make them pretty vulnerable to being countershot by Wood Elf mobility. So, you know, the Crane Gunners are an interesting one. That's probably the one thing I would swap out from this build. I mean, Crane Guns, they're pretty good against infantry-based factions, but Wood Elves, because of their loose formation archers and a lot of their power units being, you know, like cavalry and other mobility stuff, I don't know if the Crane Guns are going to be the best option necessarily. Obviously, Celestial Dragon crossbows, the regular ones, like I said, are shielded. Jade crossbows having decent armor and shields and also decent AP. I would think just having like a volume of Jade crossbows could be tough to protect against Wood Elf mobility, but again, you kind of option around that build a little bit, maybe take like 1 or 2 less cavalry just to bring in some Jade crossbows, give us some extra numbers there. You know, would also help maybe provide a little bit of harmony to Peasant Long Spears. You could also go just in a very different direction. Obviously, yeah, I mean, melee-wise, it's just, you're really going to not have a lot of things that can really compete. Like, even Gotrek here is going to have his magic weapons negated and probably just get pummeled by Durthu. But, yeah, in terms of anti-large, like, not the best, especially in terms of single entities. So Durthu himself going to be quite good in that way. Again, mainly has to worry about the armor-piercing missiles, which the mobility should be able to get in and take care of. I guess Bandits to the Silver Road, too, do technically have fire damage, even if their AP is quite poor. Not that I would necessarily recommend taking them here, but definitely interesting. Definitely interesting to see that. And then, of course, you know, you add on top of, like, okay, so Cathay's anti-large is already going to be stretched just dealing with Durthu. Then you've got 2 Forest Dragons, which, although they're not particularly heavily armored, you know, not the best weapon strength in the world, but they do have breath attacks, right, which you can kind of use to even out that infantry fight a little bit, or cavalry fight, as we saw in this example. Almost in a way, sort of a hybrid missile melee unit in the spirit of many other Wood Elves. Likewise, the Hawk Riders are very tough to use in a lot of matchups. A lot of people consider them to be kind of bad units. But the 55 charge bonus, they got 24 unit models, and so they can get in there, and even if they don't necessarily fully pay for themselves, just tactically being able to beat down those crowmen and win that mobility advantage in the sky pretty decisively early on proved essential in this fight. So hopefully you guys learned something, hopefully you enjoyed. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again, we'll see you next time.